Welcome back. Today we're really diving deep into Ray Dalio's thoughts on the U.S. economy and where it might be going. You gave us his interview, which highlights some pretty big changes happening globally. And we're going to look at how those changes could affect you directly.
Right away, Dalio presents 5 forces he thinks are shaping the economic landscape right now, which of course means they're shaping your financial future too. He talks about money and credit cycles, especially focusing on debt cycles, and he also digs into the internal politics of countries and how that impacts their economic stability and where they're headed. But it's not only about what's going on inside each country.
No, he spends a lot of time explaining how relationships between countries are changing. He calls this the international order. And of course, he brings up unpredictable things like pandemics and climate change, which can really mess up economic plans, no matter how carefully you make them. And running through all of this is technology. Dalio says it's transforming everything about our lives and the economy.
And this is where it gets interesting for you personally. Dalio says the world is moving away from a US-centric model to a multipolar system. So the US dollar's dominance might be weakening, and countries are going after their own interests more and more, often forming alliances like BRIcs, which is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. This shift could massively change how global trade works and how the whole financial system operates.
So what does all this mean for you? Well, Dalio believes the U.S. is moving towards an America-first policy. They're prioritizing internal reforms to make things more efficient and controlled. He specifically talks about streamlining government and maybe even shrinking the government workforce. Now, that could make things more efficient, but it also makes you wonder about job losses and what happens to the people affected.
Dalio doesn't try to hide the possible problems here. He's worried about economic hardship and people getting frustrated, especially those who lose their jobs because of automation or government restructuring. He sees a real risk of social unrest if this change isn't managed carefully and if there's no clear plan to help the people who get left behind.
So you're probably thinking, what's Dalio's solution? Well, he's really into education. He thinks it's the foundation for dealing with this changing world. He points out the inequalities in the U.S. education system and says we need reforms to guarantee a basic level of education and what he calls civility for everyone. He believes a better educated workforce will be more adaptable and resilient and better able to handle the challenges and opportunities of this shifting economy.
But it's not just about education. Dalio also thinks a strong private sector could help employ people who might lose government jobs. But he stresses that we need a system to efficiently direct people's skills to where they'll be most productive.
Think about it. If government jobs decrease, there needs to be a way to retrain and place those workers into areas where their skills are useful.
Right.
That's where Dalio's idea of a Manhattan Project for the economy comes in.
He imagines a collaborative effort with all sorts of different viewpoints to come up with solutions focused on boosting productivity and strengthening social cohesion. He thinks this would take the same level of coordination and focus as the Manhattan Project, which successfully developed the atomic bomb during World War II.
Now, Dalio doesn't avoid talking about debt. He doesn't agree with just printing more money like some people suggest. He says real productivity, not just more money, is what creates economic value. Printing money without increasing productivity just leads to inflation, which makes your money worth less.
He's also worried that the U.S. might be losing its ability to export inflation. As the dollar's power possibly weakens, the U.S. might see inflation become a bigger problem at home, making things even harder for many Americans. Imagine your income stays the same, but everything you need keeps getting more expensive. That's the risk Dalio is talking about.
Dalio also talks about tariffs. He admits they can bring in money and protect domestic industries for a bit, but he points out they often mean higher prices for consumers like you. And those higher prices can eat into your budget and make your life less comfortable.
But here's a nuanced point Dalio makes. He suggests that tariff money could fund initiatives to improve productivity. So instead of just using tariffs to protect industries, he suggests strategically using them to get resources for investments that could ultimately benefit the whole economy.
He compares what the U.S. is doing now to the economic strategies of Germany after World War I and Japan. They both used protectionist policies and industrial policies to rebuild their economies. It makes you wonder if those strategies could work in today's globalized world.
What's really interesting is Dalio's observation that the current geopolitical situation is making countries want to be more economically independent. This is partly because of worries about supply chains and wanting to rely less on potentially hostile countries.
Think about what this means for you. This move towards self-sufficiency could be good for national security, but it could also mean higher prices and less access to certain products as global trade changes. It's a tough trade-off between resilience and possibly paying more.
And this brings us back to Dalio's concerns about possible job losses from government restructuring. While he admits that streamlining government can make things more efficient, he also says we need a clear plan to manage the transition for people who lose their jobs.
He particularly points out the potential problems for older workers who are used to government jobs. Retraining and helping them get back into a rapidly changing private sector would be really important to soften the social and economic blow of these changes.
And this is where Dalio's emphasis on individual adaptability comes in. He stresses that even with retraining, some people might find it hard to adjust to these changes. It's not just up to the government or businesses, but also individuals to keep learning, develop new skills, and be ready to adapt to the demands of a job market that's always changing.
Dalio doesn't pretend this is easy, but he believes it's essential for handling the economic shifts that are already happening.
Dalio also notices something interesting. He says there's this optimism in the markets about pro-business policies, deregulation and tax cuts. But he kind of brings everyone back down to earth. He says those policies might boost the economy in the short term, but they don't really fix the underlying problems that could cause trouble in the long run.
Yeah, he's worried about the possibility of more deficit spending and printing money, which could make inflation worse and actually hurt the economic stability those policies are supposed to create. It's a good reminder that what looks good in the short term doesn't always mean long-term success.
And here's where Dalio's thoughts on technology really come in. He argues that as automation gets better, some jobs might disappear completely. So there's even more need for retraining and learning new skills. This means you need to always be looking at your skills and thinking about how technology could affect your job now or in the future.
Dalio paints a bit of a tough picture of the future, where a small group of people benefit a lot from technology, while a much larger group struggles to adapt. He worries about fairness and whether we can create an economic system that works for everyone, not just a few.
This leads to a big point Dalio makes about the need to help those who might not easily find jobs in the private sector. He says a safety net is important, but we can't create a system that encourages people to rely on it instead of being productive. It's a complex problem with no easy solutions.
Right.
We need to find creative ways to help people while also focusing on their long-term economic independence.
Dalio compares how efficient the private sector is with how slow and complicated government bureaucracy can be. He understands it's hard to expect government programs to effectively help displaced workers because government initiatives can be so inefficient.
So it makes you wonder, could the private sector do more to retrain and help people get back to work? Could there be partnerships between the government and businesses that use the strengths of both to create a better system for workforce development? These are good questions to think about as the economy keeps changing.
Dalio also explores how tariffs could stimulate the private sector. He imagines using tariff revenue to fund tax cuts or other things to encourage private sector growth. It's a different way of looking at tariffs not just to protect industries, but to get money for targeted investments that could help the whole economy.
But he also knows this is a complicated approach. He recognizes that trying to control the economy with tariffs and taxes requires really thinking about possible unintended consequences.
Dalio's comparison to Singapore's economic success is really interesting. He points out that investing in education and creating a culture of good behavior and productivity are key to long-term economic success. Think about how these things are playing out in your community and what you can do to promote them.
What's striking is how much Dalio emphasizes the role of early childhood education in shaping values and attitudes that lead to a successful society. He's saying that solving social and economic problems requires a long-term view, starting with investments in the next generation.
He also points out the differences in educational resources in different parts of the U.S. He says we need more equal educational opportunities. It's a reminder that where you live and the resources you have access to can have a huge impact on your education for future opportunities.
Dalio's own experiences with supporting underprivileged communities help us understand his insights. He's seen firsthand the problems people in poverty face and the impact of bad education and lack of opportunity.
This firsthand experience gives weight to his argument that solving economic inequality takes more than just economic policies. It means recognizing the social and environmental things that contribute to poverty and committing to creating a more fair and equal society.
Dalio's observations about the challenges of passing values down through generations are really relatable in our current social climate. He recognizes that traditional families are changing and things like media and technology are influencing young people's values and beliefs.
It's like he's saying that not having shared values and a common understanding of civic responsibility can hurt social unity and make it harder to work together to solve complex problems. This is something to think about as you consider your own values and how they relate to your community and the bigger society.
Dalio worries that political polarization makes these problems worse, as different groups stay in their own bubbles and find it harder to have productive conversations. This makes it even more important for you to seek out different perspectives, have respectful discussions, and be open to listening to people who disagree with you.
He gives specific insights into the problems with the U.S. education system. He criticizes the bureaucracy, the lack of accountability, and the difficulty in finding and keeping good teachers, especially in poorer communities.
What's interesting is how Dalio connects these problems to the broader issue of social mobility. He's saying that a failing education system makes inequality worse by limiting opportunities for people from disadvantaged backgrounds to improve their economic and social standing.
He also expresses frustration with the lack of political will to fix these problems. He feels like education reform often gets stuck in arguments and fails to prioritize what students actually need.
Dalio seems to be challenging us to rethink how we approach education, to go beyond simple solutions and have a more comprehensive view that recognizes how social, economic, and cultural factors all play a role in shaping educational outcomes.
What he says about the debate between funding and values in education is really relevant. He gets that resources are important, but he also says we need a strong value system that focuses on things like discipline, working hard, and high expectations. So just throwing money at the problem isn't the answer. It's about building a culture that values education and encourages students to aim for excellence.
Dalio compares the success of charter schools, which often have more freedom and flexibility, with the problems traditional public schools face. They can be stuck with bureaucratic rules and a lack of accountability. It makes you wonder if these other schooling models could teach us something about improving the whole public education system.
He also talks about what he's seen firsthand, about the challenges teachers face in under-resourced communities. He highlights how dedicated and committed so many teachers are. They work so hard to give their students the best education they can, even though they face big obstacles. It shows how important it is to support teachers and give them the resources they need to do their jobs well.
Dalio's thoughts about technology disrupting and improving education are important too. He recognizes technology's potential for personalizing learning experiences, giving access to great educational resources, and creating more efficient learning environments. But he warns against seeing technology as a magic solution. He says it's crucial to make sure technology helps and improves human interaction and teaching.
His observations about needing a minimum standard of education and civility are really timely. He says the society needs shared values and a commitment to civic responsibility. That's especially true now when things are so polarized and civil discourse and respect for different viewpoints seem to be fading.
He's worried about these values disappearing, especially in communities struggling with poverty and instability. He says a lack of education and a breakdown in social norms can create a cycle of disadvantage that's hard to escape. It shows how important it is to invest in social programs and things that promote education, civility, and community.
His focus on teaching civility is key. He says our ability as a society to solve tough problems and function well depends on our ability to talk to each other respectfully, listen to different points of view, and find common ground even when we disagree. He's calling on all of us to think about how we interact with others and to try to be more civil.
Dalio compares the high cost of incarceration with the potential savings from investing in early childhood education and social programs that aim to stop crime and help people move up socially. It shows the economic benefits of dealing with social problems proactively instead of just reacting to them. Putting money into education, healthcare, and social services can give us big returns by lowering crime, improving health, and making the economy more productive.
He also talks about his own experiences with supporting programs to help underprivileged students in his community. He emphasizes the importance of mentoring, providing access to resources, and building a supportive environment where young people can reach their potential. It shows how important it is for individuals to take action, how each of us can make a difference in other people's lives.
Dalia's initiative, called The Best, which focuses on charitable giving, shows how much he believes in the power of philanthropy to solve social problems. It gives individuals and companies a way to support causes they believe in and help create a more just and caring world.
Dalio's ideas give us a really complete picture of the economic and social forces shaping our future. He challenges us to be proactive, to get involved, and to really think about the choices we make as individuals and as a society. He reminds us that we have the power to create the future we want to live in, a future that's more just fair and successful for everyone.